All right, let's kick off. Jay, you're very welcome to another episode of Kickoff Sessions. As I said previously, my podcast is split between straight up careers advice and then also the side business entrepreneurial element. And I think in everyone, they want to have that element of freelancing, whether they know it or not, or they know the definition of freelancing. People want to try offer their service and expertise. And I think it's been really cool because like I've followed your progress for quite some time. And what was really awesome was the fact that you were in a tech space and then you wanted to go off and offer your expertise in that area or related areas, and that's where a lot of people are at. So for today we're going to get into all of the details on doing all sorts of freelancing, from pricing to getting clients, to building a portfolio, to really just getting the strategy right. So that's the main focus for today.
Fun. Yeah, let's do it. I agree. I think people have a sense towards wanting to feel independent in all kinds of different ways, but nobody wants to be dependent on
Mm.
something or somebody. So I think a lot of people naturally tend towards whether it's freelancing or trying to be a creator or in the more extreme cases starting a business. But those are pretty long paths to financial independence, but some of the most reliable paths for sure.
And also people want that like additional layer of like whether it's income or just trying something new, I think, because that's what we've learned over the last year is the fact that obviously you can't depend on your day job completely, but we also have like more time. We figured out we actually do have more time to go try and outsource or offer our services to other people. Like, so that's kind of idea for today. But what was really cool is like you started off in that tech space and then you moved. How did you find that initial transition to go and say, all right, I'm going to start offering my help to other people? Like it's a difficult space to go from zero, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a little bit rocky. I was lucky in that I had spent so much time volunteering and networking as a result here locally. That was 2017 that I left a tech startup to go out on my own. And I had started organizing local startup weekend events in 2013. And so we would do 2 to 3 events a year, and each of those events would have like 100 and something people there. So over the course of, you know, 5 to 6 years, I met a lot of people here locally. So when I did go out on my own, there were a lot of people supporting me. And I have a very good friend of mine. He didn't tell me he was doing this, but now, like looking back, I'm sure this is what was happening. When I went out on my own, he had already been on his own for quite some time. And I'm pretty sure he threw me a project just as a like, let me show Jay that he can do projects on its own. So that was like my first freelance client. It wasn't enough to live on by any means. But then I had another friend who had kind of a fun project. And he was like, I think you'd be good to this. You want to help me do this? And I was like, yeah, give me $1,000.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got started, but that's not super sustainable. Like you don't want to just cobble together one-off projects forever.
Hmm.
It's a lot more reliable to get, clients that will have evolving needs that you can also service. Um, but before I had even left my job, I had had a conversation with a guy here in town, and he said, if I was you and I had your network, I would consider facilitating mastermind groups as a business. And I hadn't heard of what a mastermind group was before. I hadn't thought about this at all, so I had him explain it to me. And he says, well, I'm a lawyer, and every month I meet with a group of other lawyers, and we help each other grow our business. Like we just
Hmm.
talk about what we're doing, what's going on, and I think you could facilitate sessions like that between people who are business owners. And I thought, yeah, I probably could do that. So that was the plan. My plan was I was going to build a business where I was facilitating these group calls. I kind of did some like back of the napkin math, made some assumptions of like, okay, I think this will be a 12-week program. If I have 12 weeks, I can probably run about 3 cohorts per year. If I think I can get 15 people in each of these 3 cohorts per year, and my expenses are this much, like I think I can make it work if I charge $400 a person. Like
Hmm.
this is the math that I was doing, and that's exactly what I did for the first year or so, and then I realized things about timing and seasonality with clients, and I changed my prices, and it was just 4 years of that.
Yeah, and I think you've like the timing and figuring out like how they move along the pipeline and whatnot is kind of like layer two and layer three. I suppose the biggest thing is kind of like getting started. So when you touch upon like the immediate network, that's an interesting observation because even like myself, whenever I got referrals or whatever, it would always come from that immediate circle first, and people think that they're not making that progress. But you kind of have to start somewhere, and if, because you have a nice
Oh yeah.
base locally, that's a great way to be. And if anything, that's good because it builds reputation and it shows that people do actually kind of trust you, and then you slowly layer yourself out. And I think you said you've built up that network through like the tech space. For me, it was through podcasting and through like fintech where I'm working in now, and I'm slowly building up that extra layer. So people are kind of like giving me like recommendations to other people, which is great, which is great. And I suppose I do have that kind of network now. It's not huge, of course, but I mean, it's just relative. And to quote Pat Flynn about 1,000 true fans or 1,000 super fans, you don't necessarily need to have all of them. Um, so what's your recommendations for really getting started? Because you're not always in a position whereby you do have a network. Now, my audience, the biggest step that they have is getting started, where to look, where do you focus your energy into is a good question.
Yeah, people hire who they know, like, and trust. And so there are already people in your life who know you, who like you, who trust you. It's going to be easier for them to hire you to do something than going to someone who doesn't know you and making sure that they know you. They don't trust you yet, so you have to build trust. And you want them to like you too, because even if they know you and they trust you, if they don't like you, they would rather work with somebody they like. So that's why it's faster to go with people who are already in your immediate circles, because they already have the necessary criteria for hiring you. So I would go there first. Like, I would think, what is the type of work that I'm doing for whom? And more so like in terms of outcomes than in terms of the what, like people don't necessarily look around saying, I need a copywriter. They look around saying like, my website sucks and not enough people are becoming customers when they land on the website. And copywriting can be a solution or a means to getting the outcome they want, which is more sales,
Correct.
So you need to think about, what is the outcome that I'm going to help people with? What type of person do I want to work with? Then do I have those people in my network? And whether the answer is yes or no, you need to start socializing the fact that you are on your own now to the people who know, like, and trust you. Because the best source of new leads are these people I call your advocates, these people who already know, like, and trust you, but they can only advocate for you if they realize there's an opportunity and they know what you're doing. So you need to, kind of plant your flag and say, this is what I'm doing. I help X person do Y thing. Then you need to meet with the people around you just to catch up with them, hear what's going on in their world. Sometimes they'll have, a problem they talk about that you can solve. And you say, hey, actually, I could help you with that if you want. Other times, at the end of the meeting, you say, this has been great. How can I help or support you? And they'll say something, probably something small or maybe nothing. And then they'll ask you, how can I help you? And you say, well, I'm helping X people do Y right now. If you know any X people, or if you know anybody that needs help with Y, let me know.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution because, like, as you said about the copywriting example, I'll give you actually a funny story. I didn't actually know what copywriting was, bear in mind, but I knew what the output was. And it was so funny because people were always saying, and I was like, what is it? Like, it obviously makes sense, but you're kind of thinking, like, what actually is it that you're delivering? So a lot of people are looking for a solution to their problem. So to work backwards, like, where do you think people should lean into? Do you think you should look at your strengths or and look at like where your skills kind of lie and say, all right, I kind of want to offer this to other people, like, because for instance, like myself, I would do a lot of like kind of consulting with podcasting with other brands because I've just lived in the detail, as you mentioned beforehand. I try every software and I go through everything. So I like doing that. And I feel personally that I've done the heavy lifting for other brands to walk into the space or other solo entrepreneurs or whatever. So like, how do you kind of analyze your own strengths and say, all right, maybe now it's time to go and make that move into freelancing?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fastest and easiest to monetize the skills you already have and can show a track record of, putting into play. As soon as you go freelance, and even if people do know, like, and trust you to do a thing, they're going to say, have you done this before? Like, what can you show me that you've done this before? And you're probably going to want to point to something. And it's easiest to have things to point to when there's skills that you've already developed, you've already deployed. Maybe it's something you've used in a past job. So look at the skills that your job demands, but not just your job title and description. look at the other things that you've done as part of that job. A lot of people will have more sales experience than they realize because maybe they're in marketing, but they worked closely with a sales team. And so they kind of learned that. Or maybe they're a designer who's learned a little bit about copywriting because of the position they've had at a company. So that's like the number one, let's start here sort of path. But if you're going out on your own because you have some sort of drive towards independence, you probably want to also think more aspirationally about what type of work do I want to be doing. And you might not be able to jump into that like right away because, again, people will want you to point to some history and some success with some job roles, especially if you're new to freelancing. But you want to be aware of that so you can start building in that direction, because you don't want to leave a job just to build like another job for yourself that you're not enjoying. You definitely want to build a life and a vocation and a career that is something that you enjoy doing, and you have that power. So definitely take, stock of that early on.
And I think really that's like the big one, because like you could be doing that exact role for a corporation or for a startup at a very high level for a very good salary. Like for instance, like working in marketing, because a lot of people will go off to freelance in marketing. You can do a fantastic job in marketing and get paid, nearly six figures at quite a young age if you're in the right company. So that's why it's like you're making that right kind of move, and that's what's quite interesting. Um, when you are looking at the idea of, okay, I'm out on my own, I'm after putting up, let's say, like the social post or whatever, what channels should you be looking at? And this is quite interesting. It's like, where do your customers kind of show up? Is that what you should be kind of focusing on and saying that, okay, I'm going to focus on LinkedIn or Instagram, or go to Upwork and Indeed and places like this to try to find those gaps?
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, there are three types of prospecting paths you can take, in my opinion. You have direct to client, which is I meet you face to face, we have a conversation, I own everything about that project, about that relationship. I coordinate with you, I sell to you, I collect payment from you. It's just us here. Second path would be what I call subcontracting, which is similar to the first path, but instead of going directly to the client, you are working on behalf of another organization or agency, where maybe you are a copywriter. I'm going to keep using this example, but you go to a web development agency. They have a client who wants a new website. That website package they sold includes some new copy on the website. They want to sell the whole package, but then they subcontract the copywriter. That's great because you don't have to do the selling yourself, but it's also very unpredictable. You don't know when those projects will come in and when they'll tap you in. You don't have a ton of control there. The third pathway is using a freelance jobs marketplace like Upwork or Fiverr. And that works well once you have some history and credibility on the platform, but it's really hard to get started because people still want to see, like, have you done this before if you're going to ask me to pay this? And until you have like a reputation.
Sorry, you just dropped off a small bit there, Jay.
People on those platforms will still want to see some reputation and history, but until you have that, they're going to try to force your prices down. So long term, where you really want to be is number one path I shared with you, the direct to client. And so when you go out on your own, you really want to go to your advocates, the people around you, and tell them what you're doing and try to drum up work from them, but also referrals from them, because you're not giving any fee to a platform. You are not, giving up part of the upside to the agency who's selling the project. You have more control. So the platforms I would really worry about are just your own social media platforms, sure, but really I would spend much more time just having one-to-one conversations with people because they convert at a much higher rate.
Yeah. Where do you find them then, though? Is this because you're balancing out your own content creation strategy? Because I know obviously like you need to be working on, prospecting and outbound messages and all things like this as well. But then do you find that kind of balance between the two and say that, okay, I'm going to work so much on my content? Because that's even what I do feel is that like you're producing so much stuff and you're working with clients. You still want more people to be coming down that kind of funnel. So do you work on creating evergreen content that you can push out on a daily basis or a weekly basis? Like, how does that kind of work?
The reality for most service providers is that the vast majority of their client work comes from their immediate network or referrals from past clients. So I would really only recommend doing content creation if you're aspiring to not do services long term. Like, I think that's a business you build so that you start to get off the treadmill of selling your time for money, which a lot of people want to do. But if you're like, you know what, I'm happy just providing a service and I like working with new clients, I like the relational aspect of it, I wouldn't worry about content at all, because it's a really difficult game that takes a lot of time, and you will get a lot more results quickly by just being really great at building relationships one-to-one with fewer people. In the beginning, when I was doing the mastermind program, I would work with 5 to 20 people at a time, and I would put them into small groups of 5, and I would meet with that group for an hour a week for 12 weeks. So my prospecting was pretty seasonal when I was doing that business as the main business. I was still doing some like one-off projects on the side, whether it was building a WordPress website or helping people build kind of like an email marketing funnel, or the two of them. But typically when I was doing this kind of seasonal prospecting, I would have a CRM. I had a very basic spreadsheet that I had where if I had a conversation with somebody and it felt like they would be a good fit for the Unreal Collective mastermind program, I would just make a note in that spreadsheet, because I was only looking for new clients like 3 times per year. So I would have that idea and that opportunity come up in conversation, but there was nothing really to pitch them on in that moment because they couldn't take action if they wanted to. When it came time for me to bring people in and start selling the program again, but you can just think about this as just like general, I have capacity and I need to bring on a new client project here soon, I would just send them an email and say, hey, was just thinking about you. I'm doing enrollment for Unreal Collective again. Last time we talked, you were talking about this problem. I think you could be a really good fit. If you have any interest in talking about this at all, no pressure, no expectation, but we should get on a call. Mm-hmm. And so the win with that email was not to sell the program. The win with that email was to get them on the phone to talk about it. Because then I could vet them and ask them a lot of questions and make sure that they are still in a place where I felt confident that I could help them. And then once they did that, I would just very, matter-of-factly say, hey, I'm hearing you talk about this. I know that this program could help you. We would start meeting on this date. You'd be surrounded by 4 other people who are doing this type of work. And I would, help you over a 12-week period, help you to do X, whatever their problem was. And that would convert pretty high. Like if they got on the phone, we had the conversation, and they did genuinely seem like a good fit, a lot of them would then, convert into clients, which is great. But the same is really true for any freelancing client or project you're trying to drum up. Like you can reach out and say, hey, was thinking about you, would love to hear what's going on in your world. If you have, 20 minutes free in the next couple of weeks, let me know. Mm-hmm. The win in the outreach is not, again, to sell the project. The win is to have a real-time, hopefully face-to-face, but at least real-time audio conversation with somebody where you can ask questions and learn about their problems to make sure that you are in a position to help them genuinely with what they're trying to do, and then just tell them, like, I'm hearing you talk about this. I can help with that.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because they're quite like, it's kind of like a warm kind of like potential client and warm sale, because like they've initially given you something that they have a pain point with, which is kind of why they're coming to you in the first place. So hopefully they have an issue that you're trying to resolve, and then it's like they kind of walked away, but due to your capacities, that's quite a unique scenario because you are at full capacity. You're only taking them on at a certain period in time, which I actually want to come back to, and actually as we discuss, so I want to say about how to manage that pipeline. But usually I often find that in discovery calls, people are trying to get all the information, whether if it's, especially if it's kind of coaching or consulting or mentoring, they're trying to get more information from it. So it's kind of like a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. It's like, how do you get someone to, understand their problem, discover more, but not necessarily give away what is going to be part of the freelancing experience? It's kind of like a 2 sides of that coin,
Yeah, I've always been on the side of things where whatever time we have together, where it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, like I will use that to its fullest and help you as much as I can during that period of time, even if it is like giving away some of the what. I don't care, because when you give generously of your time in that circumstance, they're not going to think, haha, I have everything I need now. They're going to think, wow, if I got that out of that call, he must have a lot he can share with me in this project. And that's like almost always true, especially in coaching or consulting spaces, I think, because, and especially more so coaching than consulting. Consulting, if they have like a very defined problem, you might be able to help them get to a solution pretty quickly. And sometimes I will just let people know that too. Like they'll email me, they'll say, hey, I have this problem I'm dealing with. Could I hire you for a couple hours to talk about it? In those cases, I will get them on a shorter phone call to try and vet the problem so that I can confidently say like, yeah, I can help with that. Sometimes they'll tell me their problem and I'll think to myself, I've seen this a million times. I can actually solve this with you in 15 minutes. Like, let's just get on a call. And I'll just do that because that's goodwill. They're going to have more needs down the road. But yeah, if you're like holding back from helping somebody in one of these one-on-one calls, I don't think it's serving either of you in the immediate term, because I think they sense that also.
Yeah, I get you. Because then it's a difficult balance, because it's like, okay, well, what is someone getting on one end of the spectrum? It just should be met in between, you know. And you said something cool there about as well about, you know, genuinely being able to match someone for what they want on the other end. How do you know that it's going to be a good match? So, like for instance, you know, the space you're working in, fair enough, you know a lot about it. But let's say if someone's asking you to do something a little bit out of your remit, how do you know you can deliver on that promise? Do you kind of walk away, build out some sort of kind of like roadmap, and then kind of come back to meet them? Because sometimes they're going to be edge cases and quite unique anyway to begin with. They're not going to be an exact match as the last person.
Yeah, I think it comes down to your confidence and your ability to learn and problem solve and help somebody get there. But it also does come down to like your genuine interest in doing the work. Like as time has passed, every year I say no to more and more projects, not because I can't solve it or because I don't trust myself to find a solution and help them, but it's just not where I want to spend my time. It's not a skill set that I want to sharpen, because it's not something that I want to do for other clients down the road. So, you know, there is some courage in saying no, especially when you're getting started. But that holds space for a project that's more well aligned to the type of business and the type of life that you want to live. And so, yeah, I often just say, you know, I don't think I'm the best person to help you. And maybe I have somebody in mind that can be better help, and I'll introduce them and make that connection, and they appreciate that. And so does the person who's getting the work. And now that person is an advocate for me as well. But, you know, for the most part, when people are hiring you, it's not even to say that they are completely incapable of learning a skill and solving the problem, but they are valuing their time more highly than the money that it would cost to hire someone to solve this problem for them, right? So you're probably capable of learning what it takes to solve a problem, even if you have to get on the phone with other people who have solved it before. If it's a more like hard skills type of need, like it would be difficult to learn graphic design from scratch for a new project that's going to be due in a couple of weeks. But if it's more so like thinking through solutions and coming up with a strategy, you might be able to do that.
What I often find as well, which is pretty cool, is the fact that if it is something new that you're trying to pick up, so let's use the example of copywriting, and there's a certain element of copywriting that you haven't done before. If you go off and learn that, well, now you've just kind of like always learned it, so you can reuse that with additional people. So it may take you, you know, 5 6 hours on a Saturday morning or whatever to go figure out that process, but then it's kind of like acquired from there.
Yeah.
And I give a kind of a good example as well, is what there was a piece of podcast work that I was working on with a client that actually had a much bigger budget than an individual like myself, and he wanted to use like the full spectrum of, like, let's say, the Joe Rogan microphone, all the cables, all the leads. And I had actually never worked in that space initially, so I remember spending hours going through something like that one day, and then I remember thinking to myself, you know, thinking in my head, saying, "That's done now." You know, no matter who it is in the future, that's actually, that element is done. So now
Yeah.
I've learned that, and I can build out some sort of repeatable process, which is actually kind of area I want to get into now as well, in terms of like how you make things kind of repeatable for more people and how to make things more time effective. Because the thing with freelancing a lot of times is that you're kind of capped at hours. Like there's only 24 hours in a day, and you subtract everything from there. So did you move into that model whereby you were making things that are repeatable, PDFs, different versions you could share with people?
No, I didn't go that direction just because I wasn't really interested in it. When I
Okay.
was when I was doing client services, it was always in service to the business that I wanted to build, which was more of a content business that wasn't dependent on direct hours into the system for the client. I looked at freelancing in my mastermind program as, hey, this is a way that I can earn enough money to get by, but also reserve a ton of my time for myself to build my creator business. There is a lot of power in productized services. And I would say that the mastermind program from the beginning was a productized service because it was very understood. Like I knew how to do it. It was something that was very time bound. It was something that looked the same cohort to cohort. So like that program itself was very repeatable from the beginning. But yeah, if you are providing services and you're finding that, you want to pull some time back or you want to make this less like reinventing the wheel every time, you just need to look at the patterns of what's happening, like the patterns in the type of work that you're doing, the patterns in how you are fulfilling things, the patterns in the process of onboarding a client and getting the questions you need from them and delivering to the client. And then you can really build what is called a productized service where, you might say like, hey, this productized service is a 3-page website build out in a day. So it's very specific what you're offering. It's very specific, the process to deliver it. What it's going to kind of look like. And you might be able to build some templates as well so that you can kind of repeat this and stand it up. And there's a lot of merit in that. And I think a lot of unlock for new revenue if you're feeling like you're tapping out your capacity. Because you do get to a point where it's like, well, my only way to grow revenue is to increase my prices or to start to build out like a team underneath me. But that's a challenging thing to do, especially if you want to hire people full time. Like it's easier to hire freelancers and kind of have this bespoke pseudo agency where you don't have anybody full time, but you're taking on projects and you're subbing some of it out and paying them. If you try to go like full agency, it is a big chasm to cross to be able to pay a team full time and still have like the same economic benefit to yourself. It's like a big jump in revenue that you have to make.
It's completely different as well in terms of the input you have to do because fair enough, you might be still doing your freelance work, but you're also working on the admin side of building a team, hiring, trying to figure out the right people, trying to build. You could be building out. You could be getting partnerships with Slack. You might not. You might need to do have all these different types of things that you don't even anticipate. So it's a whole different world walking into the agency space. Um, Working backwards on what you were saying about pricing. So what type of pricing is available to freelancers in terms of what can you essentially what models are there? So you said there about increasing your prices, which is the most obvious one when you need to, but should you look at projects in terms of cost per hour, cost per week or month, the project base? What are different options people should be considering?
It is a good idea to have a good sense for what you can command for an hour of your time or how much a project, how much time it will take you and how much you'll earn for that. But I really don't recommend pricing your time by hours unless the way that they are buying your time is very much like, I need an hour per week with you. You don't need to prepare anything. I just need you to get on the phone and talk to me. Okay, price that by the hour, sure, because there's not any hidden costs in that. It's just like show up, share advice, consult, advise, whatever. Otherwise, I really recommend doing project-based pricing, project-based or retainer-based. Project-based would be like, this is a very discrete thing. Like we have a problem, we want an outcome. It's very clear what the end result is and what the deliverable is. And when that's done, this is how much we pay you. That's kind of project-based. If they need your services for like a set of priorities or ongoing things month to month, then it's kind of like there's not a discrete end to this. We just want you to help us with this, project or activity. Then I would try to price that on a monthly retainer basis where you know, like every month, this is how much the client pays me. This is how much time I'm dedicating to that client. But really, I try to go project based most of the time.
Mm. And where do you get the sort of calculation for valuing your time? So, especially for young people, of course, who are trying to, essentially get their foot on the ladder in terms of freelancing. Do you just pick a number out of the air? Do you go to things like Upwork to get a comparative mechanism? Like, where do we find these numbers from?
Yeah, it's got to be rooted in reality, but I tend to pick a number kind of out of the air and then just rise prices over time. There is like a very good case to be made about what is called value-based pricing. If you search breaking the time barrier, there's this really great PDF that the team over at I think FreshBooks put together about value-based pricing.
Cool.
And the idea is basically like if you ask a certain uh, set of questions to the client, they will give you answers that will help you mathematically determine how much your work is worth to them so that you can price it based on the outcome they're going to get. And that is absolutely true. It's also very challenging to teach people how to do that because you have to ask these clients, like, okay, so you want me to do copywriting on your website. How much traffic does your website get on a monthly basis right now? Okay. How many people are converting into customers right now? Okay. How much are they paying per sale? Like you can get to this mathematical answer of saying like, okay, it sounds like right now you're generating $10,000 per month from the website. Your goal is to get it up to $20,000 per month, which we can get to by doubling your conversion rate. So I'm going to charge you $20,000 because that will pay for itself in 2 months. Like you can do that and that makes some sense, but it's hard to do. So really where I start with people is I say, think about the project, think about everything involved with what you're going to have to do and how much time it's going to take you. Quote a price that makes you excited to do it.
Mm.
Like if you're not excited to do it, if you're going to wake up and feel like, damn it, I underpriced this, I'm dreading this work, I'm not getting paid what I'm worth, it's taking away time, I'd rather be doing something else, then like you're getting started off on the wrong foot. You're never going to feel better about a project than like right at the beginning when you sell it and haven't done it yet. And you need to feel good about it right then. So start with a price that you feel good about. You should be being told no by clients. If you are pricing projects and everybody says yes, then you're pricing too low. And the danger about pricing too low, especially in the beginning, is you will generate more clients like the ones that you have because they are friends with people like them who have similar needs, who have similar budgets and lifestyles. So if you're pricing something way too low, you're going to get a bunch of inbound people saying like, oh, wow, I want that low price too. And now you're on this treadmill of spending all your time making not enough money, and it's hard to break out of. It's better to start off more premium in the beginning because that will affect your client pipeline and, you'll have more margin on your time.
That's really interesting. And I think that's very, very unique because a lot of people would try just get, a lot of clients, go a long list of clients necessarily, and then they're all low kind of value. But I think maybe the concern for people, and maybe even myself in a scenario, is what if you do price yourself pretty high, and then someone says no, and they kind of walk away? How would you combat a scenario like that?
People should be saying no and walking away. Like you should not be closing every client or they're taking advantage of you and they know it. And that's why everyone's saying yes. But most of the time, if somebody thinks your price is too high, it's not a, well, see you later. It's like, that's a little high. Like, what can we do for this price? And you can say, well, at that price, here's how I would reduce the scope of the project or change what we're doing, and I can meet you there. It's called having a downsell. You should have upsells and downsells so that depending on how people react, if there's like obviously more room in the budget or a little bit less, you can say, okay, here's how we reduce the scope, or hey, and by the way, if you want to take this another step further, here's what we can add on to the scope for this amount of money. And some people will be like, yeah, do that. And now you've just
Yeah.
generated, sometimes the equivalent of an entirely new client, just adding onto the scope of an existing client.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And for people that don't understand actually the concept of scope, because like obviously from a tech background, I know that obviously quite well. So that's like the requirements that are contained within a project, and that leads perfectly into what I wanted to ask around scope creep, which essentially is additional requirements being handed in. So I ran a Q&A session beforehand. I always do that before I record an episode. And the biggest thing people were saying is that their clients will come back with additional requirements or say things should be slightly different. So how should you approach that? Should you lock down the scope initially, send that across in like a proposal, and then stick within that, or should you do a bit of a goodwill, add in additional elements, but this may leak into the time? And that was some of the feedback I was getting, really.
Yeah, you should absolutely scope out a project and, put definition to it in your contract with the client ahead of time. This protects you. It gives you a living document to point to and say, hey, this is what we agreed upon as far as like what I'm delivering to you, the timeline, when and how to pay. Like you need that spelled out on a piece of paper. Not because people are trying to maliciously take advantage of you all the time, but because they're busy and sometimes they forget what they agreed to. So it's easy for you to point back to that and say, in the contract, here's what it says. When they want to add additional work that's outside of that scope that you've put into the contract, then you need to push back on it. Or say, and this is something that I learned from Paul Jarvis, I'd be happy to do that because that is outside of our scope. It will take this much extra time and it will cost this much. Do you want me to get started? So they're hearing like, oh, that's not what we agreed to. You will do it, but it will take extra time and cost extra money. And they can make a decision of like, is that worth it to me or not? And it is what it is. They agreed to a certain scope for a certain price.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way you should handle it. Is it a little bit of a gift to do that for free? Of course. If you do want to give them that gift and build goodwill, which sometimes is a good strategy, you can say, hey, I'm happy to do that. It's a little bit outside the scope of what we talked about here. Typically, I would charge X dollars for it, but I'll do that this time. But if you want to add anything else to the scope, it's going to be this much time, this much money.
Makes sense. It's kind of like getting that those requirements nailed down first, and then taking it case by case. So if it seems a good idea to take it on or whatever, it doesn't seem too time consuming. It's a goodwill and gives you good reputation. Another question that came back off this actually was around multiple revisions. So if you have delivered something, so I think a good example here is like a logo. Let's say, for instance, you deliver a logo. You tell me that you want a Kickoff Sessions logo. I send you Kickoff Sessions logo. We go back and forth a few times, but now it's gotten to the stage where you still want revisions. How do you handle scenarios like that?
Most designers I see have very specific language in their contract on this too, where they say, here's what I'm delivering to you, a finished logo, and here are the file formats I'll deliver it in. This includes 2 rounds of revisions with additional rounds of revisions priced at X dollars. So like you're protecting yourself to say, I will do 2 revisions, and then if we want to go beyond that, I'm telling you up front, it's going to cost this much money. And then when you get to that 3rd revision and the client says, I want to do another one, you can say, okay, well, it's going to be this much money. It's in the contract. And they can decide yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Set those rules, set those hard rules. Last area I wanted to chat around was around those actual contracts. So where do you generate these? Do you generate them yourself? Do you put them together? Is there some online resource people can use? People can try to just put them together themselves so that it's pretty soft touch, really?
Yeah, I try to do things pretty lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
I basically include a statement of work at the beginning of a project where it's 1 to 2 pages. It has line items for each deliverable and a price, and it has like a timeline of here are either the stages of me delivering this or the date that I'll deliver this on. Here is the compensation. So it's pretty lightweight. There are some templates out there. I would go with and.co has a pretty good template. The best thing to do is to chat with a small business lawyer and explain your own business and have them draft something for you. It is a cost, but it's pretty much a one-time cost, because then you can edit that template. But there are templates online, and Co is the one that I've used in the past.
Nice. Cool. It's just kind of setting those kind of hard rules and then just making those kind of adjustments, I think, because you don't want to find yourself in a scenario whereby you have to go back on what you were saying, because that will leave that kind of bad reputation, and then you're not going to get those referrals, and you're not going to get essentially an ongoing list of clients that you want to work with, really, aren't you?
Yeah, and you're not going to get it right off like at the beginning. Like if you're listening
Yeah.
to this and you're taking some misdirection, you're definitely getting started off better than most people do. But like you're gonna screw something up and you're gonna realize, damn, I did not protect myself in the contract for this situation. Now I'm gonna add in some language in the contract to protect myself against this situation, and it just evolves over time that way. You should expect that. You should be okay with that. You should give yourself some grace if you don't know everything when you're just getting started. Nobody knows everything when they're just getting started. So it's good to start with a contract, do your best. Every freelancer I know has gotten burned somehow at some point, myself included. It's okay. It sucks. It'll happen. But yeah, we're all trying our best out here, and you will learn, you will get better, and
Mhm.
that's the way it goes.
What were some of your biggest issues you had when you got burnt?
I just had a client that just didn't pay, and I don't think I had a contract in place with him. Um, Here's the thing, though. Even if you do have a contract in place, you do have legal protection, but then you have to take legal action, right? Like usually the contract plays the role of being the threat, like looming over a client, and the prospect of that threat is what gets them to pay you when they might otherwise flake. But if a client just doesn't send you money, like what are you gonna do? You're gonna go over there and like fight them?
Yeah.
Um, no. And if you do have a contract, you can take them to small claims court, and maybe you want to do that. Maybe it's worthwhile. Um, but like you'll have somebody who just disappears and doesn't pay you, and you have to make the decision like, is this going to be worth the effort for me to fight it, or will I just be pissed off and move on?
Mhm.
The contract serves to like make fewer people make bad decisions like that, but it will happen no matter what. And I had that happen to me, and luckily it was like a local guy who I had kind of a pre-existing relationship with. So once he realized that like we were not cool anymore, he eventually came back and was like, "Hey, I know I kind of screwed you over on this project. Here's the payment for that," and we were good. But um, one benefit of working through a platform like Upwork or something is they protect you to some degree with this. But if you're going direct to client, it will happen.
And even with Fiverr, so I had a friend actually who had an issue whereby the person wasn't happy with it, wouldn't accept the offer, even though it was all delivered requirements were met. And even Fiverr, in the dispute that goes on in Fiverr, had sided with the buyer. Sorry, no, had sided with the seller and said, okay, they'd met all the requirements, but because the buyer does not accept it, we have to side with him and actually not send across the money. So that person actually did receive those documents
Hmm.
because they were sent across the private channel that's in Fiverr, but they still didn't release the money. And that's just the nature of it. There's someone always going to get burned on the downside, I suppose, and this is the disadvantages that happen with anything online.
Yeah, and the real lesson here is like you will have conversations with people who are willing to pay you money, and there's going to be a voice in your head saying, "I don't trust this person," or "This project doesn't feel right," or "I'm not feeling good about this." That instinct is always correct. It's and I've talked to a lot of freelancers about this. Like if you're having reservations up front with a person or project, it's only going to get worse. And you should listen to that voice unless you're in like a really desperate place.
Yeah, I get you. It's almost never worth it, really, is it? Jay, just to finish up, where can people find you? Where can find people can find all your stuff, and if they want to get involved and start working with you?
Yeah, I would recommend going to freelancing.school. We have a bunch of free articles there to help with freelancing. We have a community there for you to learn a little bit. We also have a couple of courses on Freelancing School. The Freelancing School course bundle, I just lowered the price to $199 for 3 courses. But zero pressure, zero expectation. If this is helpful, there's a lot more of this in that course bundle. But otherwise, you can just search my name, and I'm easy to find.
Yeah, I find you on LinkedIn, just like myself, So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.